All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started on building our PHP website version of Inside Out. Um, from the outside, it's just some pretty bootstrappy stuff and a little bit of jQuery, things like that. But what we do to make this happen is pretty interesting, and hopefully you'll enjoy learning how to do that. So where we start is we go to our project, and our lesson. Inside the lesson, under lesson resources, there'll be a link available, and it's for the PHP starter source code. What it is, it's a link to Bitbucket, and it will pull down the code that you need to get started. So once it downloads, we'll go ahead and go to our downloads folder, and inside that, we're basically unzipping, extracting everything. We can get rid of the README file. Really has nothing interesting in it. And we'll go ahead and we'll copy in this code. And essentially what this code is where we're here, a starting point, so that we don't have to build the initial code out, and we can get going on the website itself, on the PHP itself. If you can't find your folder, one of the ways you can get to it is right-click on your site in Dreamweaver and go to Explore, and it will actually open the folder for you. I'm going to paste that code in there that we downloaded from Bitbucket, I think. Maybe not. Great opportunity, though, to demonstrate how you can make this folder accessible to yourself by dragging it over into your quick links. Obviously, if you do it too much, you end up with one huge mess. Looks like I already have this over there, but I'm going to finish the demonstration so that you can see. And I'll put it right there. And so it just moved it up. So now I actually can see inside that folder and go to my downloads folder and go ahead and open this up again. You can extract all, or you can just go in there however you would like. I believe you should know how to do this by this point. We'll go into that folder, and inside it is where we'll find our index.php and our assets folder, which is what we need to get started. We're going to take our assets folder and our index.php and drag it right into the root of our site, which it should appear there now. Which means if I close these windows out and go over to Dreamweaver and I right-click in the open area and say refresh local, it should open these up for me. So right now I'm local, and if I go out to the web and look at my site as it sits in my folder with the subdomain that we created, it's still nothing. And what I'm going to do is go push those files now up. And so I have my site selected. I did a put, and I'm going to hit OK because it's asking me, do you really want to push the whole site up? Well, yeah, it's really not that big of a site. And if I go out and I refresh, at this point, I have the starting point. I'm going to close my example site so that we don't get it confused. And then the other thing that we want to do is open up our local. So we'll go ahead over to our WAMP setting, go to localhost, and in localhost, we should be able to go to web 230 inside out, and there's our code locally. So I always leave the favorite icon set to local, and I always put local to the far left, and then I put remote to the right. Just my way of being able to differentiate between the two. So now we're going to get to work. Right now we see I've included 3 CSS files, a JS file, and an index .php file, which is full of code, and it's full of code because of the fact that basically I begged, borrowed, and stealed from Bootsnap and other places to give us a starting point. We're not really interested so much in learning HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in this class as we are about learning PHP. So I'd rather not focus too much time there. The first thing we want to do is we want to take this file and we want to break it up. And the reason we want to break it up is with PHP, especially, we don't have to put the header in the same place all the time. We can use file include, and with the file include, that puts us in a great position to separate code, manage code from multiple places. So what we're going to do with our code for the header that is in our starting file, we know that the header and the content, we have main and we have content. Now this is a judgment call. I'm going to go ahead and take from the content all the way up to the doc type, and I'm going to put that into a header include file. To do that, the first thing we need to do, let's close our assets so we don't get confused, and let's come over here and let's do a new folder, and let's call that file folder includes. Some people call it includes. I don't know why, I just choose to call it include, and I'm going to refresh so that it takes its spot. Inside there, I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call that file header.inc for include, just to indicate that it's an include file, .php. And when I open this file up, we get a default HTML file, and what we want to do with that is replace it with the entire top portion of our page over here. We know that the head's always going to be in the top of the page, the doc type, some of our scripts. We even know the body's going to always open, the content's going to be inside of that. And then we have a div wrapper, and that wrapper basically wraps right along with the body, wraps all the content in the page. Then we have a header, main, and additional points to make changes dynamically. And so we're going to actually take all the way from content to doc type, and we're actually going to cut it out of there and just leave section in there. Go over to our include file, select all, and paste that in there and save it. So that we can see what's happening, I would encourage flip back and forth when you're local and take a look at what happens. We just lost pretty much all of our functionality because our CSS is in the head. And then we're going to take it a step further, and we're going to come down and grab from here, which is the closing div for the container, and we're going to cut that out, create another include file, and we're going to call this file footer.inc.php. We're going to select all in there, and we're going to paste all that in. And now let's take a quick peek here before we save and go look at things. Well, we're going to save our footer. Make sure you save that. So over here, what I like to do is in this content div, I like to comment, and you're required to if you're taking this class, comment in here. And I always call it jump point. And then I'll put where it's jumping to, meaning the closing div. Probably could use better words. I have silly ways of saying things, so I'll stick with my jump point. And the reason I call it jump point is because it's actually going to the include/footer header.inc.php. Close that out, and what I want to put is jump to, and I'm going to save that. I'm going to come over to my footer, and I'm going to right above this div, I'm going to go ahead and put in there jump point from, and put header, just so that I can know that I'm coming in from the header to the footer, or looking up from the footer, where the connection points are. This one's pretty simple in your mind because of the fact that that you realize that it's right there. So now if we go out and we take a peek at our page, all we're going to have at this point is we didn't save our indexed up here. Make sure you save it. And all that we should see then is our sections. No styling, no nothing. And so all we have here are two sections. This is just filler text. I like to use lorem, but when you're testing in browsers, it just becomes a pain because it constantly asks you if it wants to translate. So this is where we're going to start using some PHP. Open up our PHP, and then I like to close it right away to make sure, in case I go to peek at something, that I don't get errors. But we're going to go in here and we're going to say include, and then we're going to close it, and we're going to say include because of the folder, and then header.inc.php. And let's go ahead and close that off, and control save that, and let's go take a peek and see what happens on our page. So we brought our header in along with our CSS. No footer yet, no closing body tag or anything, but it was able to draw the page all the way up down to the end of the last section. Now that we have our header, I'm sure you have it figured out. We're going to go ahead and do the same thing for our footer. And what this should do is actually bring in, saved it, and I'm going out, and it brought in our JavaScript and our footer, which is pretty cool because now any page that we create, all we have to do is include the header and the footer, and we will be good to go. Our next step that we want to do is for just to keep code down and to add the fun of dynamic content into play. We're going to go to our include again, and we're going to create page.home.inc.php. And all we're doing is we're just looking for a place to throw our content in, our filler content, so that our page looks good when we're testing it. We have content there to test against, but we don't need it in the way. So let's go ahead and get that out of the way. So I cut it. And before I go paste it into page, I'm going to get rid of those opening and closing because we don't need them anymore. And I'm going to go over to page include, homepage include, and I'm going to get rid of, we don't need doc type, and all that will be available through the header, so we don't even need that there. So I just pasted it in there. I'm going to close it out. I'm going to save before we go and include it and just take a peek, see what's going on here, and we have our page without content. So now I can come down here, and what we can do is we can include our page home include in here, right here. So what's happening? We're pulling in the content from this page, before the PHP processes it, we're pulling in the content for this page, for this part, and for this part. We're doing it all, and then it pulls them in, and then the PHP processes it. And there we have exactly what we started with, except that it looks a little different in the code, which is great. The next thing that we want to do is in the header, we'll go look at it. In the header, we have a place where we want to put the site title here. And we want to put the site title here. We want to do that dynamically because we want to be able to change that or append or prepend information to that depending on what page you're looking at. And so the way that we do that is with variable data. And to keep it very simple for ourselves, what we're going to do is we're actually going to create what is called a config file. So I'm going to right click on the root of the site and I'm going to say new file. And I'm going to name that file config.php. I'm going to open the file and get rid of any HTML content that's in there. And then in that file, what I'm going to do is create a variable that we can use to name the site and use throughout our site. One of the nice parts about this is that with this variable, we're able to reuse it over and over and over again. So to start doing that, what we want to do is we want to use something called a constant variable. And the way, we got to open up our PHP. Let's go ahead and close our PHP. And then let's come in here and indent. And the way that we create a constant variable, which you'll learn in the lesson, there's information attached to the lesson about it. The way that we do it is we define a constant variable. And what we can do is we give the variable a variable name, and in this case we're going to call it site_name. Constant variables are named with uppercase and underscores. And then we can give it a string, and we can also additionally say whether it's case sensitive or not by giving a true or false at the end of it. But the first thing we're going to do is give the value, and the value is going to be inside out PHP project step 2, I think, is what we're going to call it. And actually, I mean step 200. And actually what we can do, let's just leave out the PHP project and let's just call it inside out step 200. We don't have to define whether or not it's case sensitive. I'm not going to. And we have to, of course, turn it off with a semicolon. Let's be good coders and let's comment underneath it. Some people go over top, some people, and actually, let's go over top. Let's stick with best practice. Best practice is to go over top. And the way that we can do this is we can put in here defines the title of the, let's call it the default title of the website. And the reason we say default is sometimes we might want to use something different. The thing about constants is we can use this and we can append and prepend to it, but we can't change it after it's instantiated. It is what it is. But at this point, we can actually save our config file. And we can go over to our index. For now, we'll put it in here. We'll be able to put it in our header at some point, but sometimes there's reasons that you don't want it there. So we're going to do an include, and then we're going to do include. Oh, actually, we don't need an include. We're going to do config dot php. Put a semicolon at the end, and we're going to save that. Now what should happen is it'll pull that in. It'll pull these four files in. And at this point, we really won't see a change. We know we saved because we did not use the variable anywhere. So if we go to config and we copy the variable, and we go to our header, and our first place that we're using a title is in the head, and we come in here and we just do an echo and echo out the site name, and then close our PHP, and we do the same thing while we're at it. We take it from the title tag there, we do the same thing, and we come down here and we echo it out in the H1 tag, and we hit save. And we redo. We now see that we've changed the title and the title there. Now remember, of course, PHP generates the HTML and puts it out. So there's no sign of includes or what was used or anything like that on the actual browser, because that's all post-process. It's already been processed on the server and sent to the browser. Now that we have that taken care of, now it might be a good idea to go ahead and push that out to our server, see how well it works on our server. Honestly, nothing should change at this point. And what I tend to do is when I'm this small in the site, this new in the site, I'll push the whole thing. And the reason I do that is it definitely helps catch errors early in code that you're using. You saw when I refreshed it, changed the title. So it's a good idea to check on both servers if you can. You don't have to go crazy about it. It's just something that you want to do.